something that I would like to raise within the cabinet, and whatever concerns I have, I will flag to the cabinet and to the Prime Minister.
No clearances should be given for any project until there's total compliance of the Forest Right Act and other PESA conditions.
What kind of National Investment Board is set up, what its terms of reference are, what its mandate is, and whether it's truly a single window clearance for any project over which the central government's got jurisdiction, I think would really be a very important first step in bottlenecking investment on the ground.
A campaign is owned by green activists opposing the setting up of the National Investment Board, or the NIB, for fast-tracking environmental and other clearances for large infrastructure projects. A proposal that was mooted by Finance Minister P. Chidambaram has clearly run into rough weather due to opposition by his cabinet colleagues, including Jayanti Natarajan and KC Deo. Hello and welcome. You're watching We Mean Business. On the show today, we're asking if the opposition to the setting up of the National Investment Board is justified or not. Let me introduce our guests on this show. Joining us, Mr. Pradeep Singh, Managing Director of IDFC Projects, with me here in the Delhi studio. Also, Mr. Parvesh Minocha, Group MD and Chairman of the Board of Growth and Development with Feedback Infrastructure. Dr. Prodipto Ghosh, former Secretary with the Ministry of Environment and Forests, as well as Distinguished Fellow of TERI. Mr. Parvez Umrigar, MD and CEO of Welspun Infrastructure, joins us from Mumbai. Mr. Darryl D'Monte, Chairperson of the Forum of Environmental Journalists of India, also joins us from Mumbai. And Mr. Hemant Kanoria, CMD of SREI Infrastructure, joins us from Kolkata. Many thanks, all of you, for being with us here on the show. Before we move on with the discussion, let me first try and understand and explain to our viewers what exactly is this National Investment Board. Well, it is proposed that the NIB will fast-track mega infrastructure projects. Clearances required for major projects would be granted without any delays. Also, the National Investment Board will have the power to overrule ministries, and that's exactly what has obviously got some ministers worried. So what exactly is the opposition to the setting up of the National Investment Board? Well, Jayanti Natarajan, the Minister of Environment and Forests, has written a letter to the Prime Minister, a rather strongly worded one, saying the concept is unacceptable. The NIB has no constitutional authority to decide on the failure of any minister. When the minister of a ministry takes a decision, there is absolutely no justification for a National Investment Board to assume his or her authority, nor will the National Investment Board have the competence to do so. I request you to kindly intervene and refer this proposal to various levels of government for proper examination. A strongly worded letter that has been written by the Environment Minister. So will we see the National Investment Board going through or not? And is the opposition justified? Let me throw open the discussion to our panelists now. First, my question to Mr. Umrigar is, how critical is the National Investment Board for fast-tracking key projects?
Well, I think it's, for a minute, let's leave out the reference to a name as to whether we call it National Investment Board or anything as such. What here we are talking about is that we need a clear window, a single track approach, inviting the investments. Today, if we were to just put the numbers in perspective, we are looking at 2012-17 requiring $1 trillion. 50% of that is expected to come from private participation, and that's where the infra projects lie. When you talk about these sort of numbers, you are effectively looking at, just to put in a very sense of absolute and a relative comparison, a size of L&T's entire net worth is exactly 1%, or the size of Coal India's net worth is 1% of what amounts we are talking about. If you're going to invite that sort of private money, it requires quite clearly a respect for capital. I think that's what it's all about. We need to fast-track projects. The economy needs infrastructure development, and especially in the current scenario where we're already going through a crisis of confidence, the importance of a fast-track clearance is all the more necessary.
Mr. Singh, would you like to add to that? The fact that it's almost, we're at a stage when fast-tracking infrastructure projects has become critical to achieving the next level of growth, because just looking at the sheer number of clearances that are needed, just looking at how long it takes to get those clearances, it's perhaps something that has obviously got the Finance Minister, the Prime Minister extremely worried, because we really need to fast-track the process of getting approvals.
Yeah, Shweta, I think, frankly, it will be a national tragedy if we reduce the issue of the National Investment Board to an issue of economic development versus environment,
right,
or industrialization versus environment.
But that's what it's come to be now.
Exactly, and that I think is really very sad and very tragic, and it distracts from the primary goals of the board and what the country today needs. It is nobody's case that the environment is not important. I mean, the last thing I want is my children or grandchildren to grow up in a country where industrialization and economic growth has damaged the environment. That's not the issue. The issue really here is about the process, the decision making, the approvals, the clearances that projects today need.
Okay.
And anybody who's intimately associated with developing projects, with activities regarding economic growth and infrastructure, cannot argue that the process today is not seriously flawed, that there are not irrational delays, there are not delays which have nothing to do with the objectives that are being achieved. In fact, it can be easily argued that many of these obstacles in the process of decision making almost seem deliberate, created to create opportunities for rent, created to create patronage.
Okay, that's a very important point you've made, and hold your thought, because I'm going to get Dr. Ghosh to come in here and try and explain the objections that have been raised really to the setting up of the National Investment Board. And the primary objection that really is that it lacks the constitutional authority. The fact that you're trying to overrule or override the decision of ministries and critical ones like the Environment Ministry.
Well, let me not try to address the constitutional and legal question about the validity of the National Investment Board. But I feel that this proposal needs greater reflection. It seems to be based on some notion that delays occur in environmental and forest clearances because officials in MoEF are just sitting on their backsides and navel gazing. And I don't think that is a proper analysis. Now, when we talk of delay in respect of what timeline? Is there some expectation that environmental and forest clearances should be done in, say, a month? For example,
but
like
do you admit that it takes longer than it should?
Well, let me come to that, because I have to explain the process. Okay? Now, is there a basis for an expectation that it should be done in, say, a month? Now, we have to see what is involved in an environmental appraisal. Say we are looking at a power plant, a major infrastructure project. The potential environmental impacts include air pollution, water pollution, discharge of hot water to the rivers, soil pollution, and the possibility of Bhopal-style accidents. Now, all of these can have potential adverse impacts for the communities. Now, an environmental appraisal would need to examine the plant's technology. It would need to predict levels and locations of adverse impacts. It would need to address the likely health, livelihood, and social impacts of these environmental impacts and the measures for their mitigation. A typical environment impact analysis is a 400 to 500 page technical document prepared by a multidisciplinary team of professionals who are identified and appointed by the project proponent. Now, once this EIA document is done, the results have to be shared with the local and the outside stakeholders. Their views have to be taken on board, and then they have to be specifically addressed in the EIA document.
India's #1 news app just got even better. Download NDTV's new app, fully optimized for retina display, full screen view, faster response time, and Sudoku. NDTV's new iPad app. Download now.